arms thick with muscle beneath the lace sleeves of her wedding dress. She could probably lift him with one hand. "What happened to you?" he whispered. Anna Mae's smile faltered. She'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Imagined every possible reaction, except the look of horror now creeping across his face. "I got sick after you left," she said quietly. "Dr. Morrison called it gigantism. My body just kept growing and growing until—" She gestured helplessly at herself. "Until I became this." Marcus shook his head, backing away further. No, Annie died. Your father told everyone you died of fever that winter. My father lied." The words came out sharp as broken glass. He was ashamed. Said no man would ever want me looking like a circus freak. So he told everyone I was dead and shipped me off to live with relatives in Missouri. She watched as Marcus processed this, saw the exact moment his grief turned to anger. "You let me believe you were dead," he said, his voice rising. "For 12 years, Annie. 12 years I mourned you. I came to these mountains because I couldn't bear to live in a world without you in it. I tried to write," she said desperately, "every week for the first year. The letters came back unopened. Father told everyone I was dead, and the postmaster wouldn't deliver mail to dead people." Marcus ran his hands through his dark hair, now streaked with gray at 32. The boy who'd left their small Kansas town had been lean and hopeful. The man standing before her was built like a tree trunk, all muscle and scars and weariness. "Why now?" he asked. "Why come looking for me now?" Anna Mae's throat closed up. This was the part she dreaded most. "Because I'm dying," she said simply. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He staggered, reaching out to steady himself against a pine tree. "The same condition that made me grow," she continued, her voice steady despite the tears starting to fall. "It's putting too much strain on my heart. Dr. Patterson in Denver says I have maybe 6 months. She took a step toward him, and Marcus had to crane his neck to look up at her face. Even through his shock, he could see she was still beautiful. Different, yes. Intimidating, absolutely. But those were still Annie's eyes, still Annie's gentle smile. "I spent my whole adult life being stared at, being called names, being treated like a curiosity," she said. "Men would pay money just to stand next to me and have their photograph taken. I was the Kansas giantess, the gentle mountain, the 8th wonder of the world. But never just Annie. She knelt down in the dirt, bringing herself closer to his eye level. Her wedding dress pooled around her like snow. Do you know why I was wearing this dress when I found you?" Marcus shook his head mutely. "Because 3 days ago, a cattle bearer named Harrison Wade asked me to marry him. Not because he loved me, but because he wanted to own something unique. He told his friends I'd make an impressive addition to his collection, right between his prize bull and his stuffed grizzly bear." Marcus felt sick. "I said yes," she continued, watching his face carefully, "because I was tired of being alone. Tired of sleeping in boarding houses, where they charge me double for a bed that fits. Tired of eating meals by myself while people whisper and point. But you ran away." "I ran away because when the preacher asked if I took Harrison Wade to be my husband, all I could think about was a 16-year-old boy who used to call me beautiful when I barely reached his chin. A boy who kissed me under the old oak tree and promised that no matter what happened, we'd find each other again." She reached out slowly, carefully, and touched his cheek with fingers that were large but infinitely gentle. "I ran away because I realized I'd rather die alone than live without ever knowing if that boy still existed somewhere in the man you become." Marcus closed his eyes, leaning into her touch despite himself. Her hand was warm, calloused from hard work, and it smelled like the rose soap she'd always used. "I'm not that boy anymore, Annie," he whispered. "The mountains change a man, make him hard practical. I've killed men who try to rob me. I've gone months without speaking to another human soul. I'm not the gentle farm boy you remember. And I'm not the delicate farm girl you remember," she replied. "But I'm still the woman who loves you. That never changed, not even when everything else did." She stood up slowly, towering over him again like a beautiful, heartbreaking monument. "I know I must look like a monster to you now," she said. "I know it's not what you dreamed about all these years. But I had to try, Marcus. I had to know if what we had was real enough to survive this. Marcus stared up at her, his mind reeling. This wasn't how he'd imagined their reunion in his countless dreams. In those dreams, she was still small and perfect, running into his arms like something out of a fairy tale. But this wasn't a fairy tale. This was real life, messy and complicated and heartbreaking. "How did you find me?" he asked finally. "Stories," she said. "Traders talking about a mountain man who lived alone near Copper Creek. A man with dark hair and gray eyes who was kind to travelers but kept to himself. A man who sometimes sang sad songs in the evening, songs about a girl named Annie." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He thought no one could hear him in these remote mountains. "Every story made me more certain it was you," she continued. "So I bought a horse with the last of my money and rode north from Denver. Took me 4 days to find this place." She gestured toward the small log cabin he'd built with his own hands, the neat garden, the smokehouse where he cured his meat. It was a good life, simple and peaceful. But looking at it through her eyes, he realized how lonely it must seem. "You built something beautiful here," she said softly. "It's not much. It's everything you always said you wanted. A place where you could live free, away from people who judge you for being different." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. He'd fled to mountains to escape judgment, while she'd endured it every day of her adult life. Thunder rumbled overhead, and they both looked up to see dark clouds gathering above the peaks. Storms coming. Marcus said automatically, "I should go." Anna Mae's voice was steady, but he could see the heartbreak in her eyes. "I've said what I came to say. I just wanted you to know that I loved you then, and I love you still. That has to be enough." She turned to go, her long strides carrying her toward the tree line where he could see a horse tied to a low branch. "Wait," Marcus called out before he could stop himself. She paused but didn't turn around. "The storm," he said lamely. "It'll be bad. You can't travel in weather like this." Now she did turn, hope flickering in her eyes like a candle flame. "You don't have to pretend to care about my safety, Marcus. I know this isn't what you wanted." "Stay," he said, the word coming out rougher than he intended. "Just until the storm passes. It's the least I can do. It wasn't love. Not yet. Maybe it couldn't be. Not after everything that had changed. But it was something, and for now, something was enough to keep her from walking out his life forever." Anna Mae nodded once, then began walking back toward the cabin as the first drops of rain began to fall. The storm hit Marcus's cabin like an avalanche of sound and fury. Rain hammered the roof while wind screamed to the pines, bending them nearly horizontal. Inside, the small space felt even smaller with Anna Mae's presence filling every corner. She sat on a simple wooden chair, but it creaked dangerously under her weight. Marcus quickly grabbed extra cushions from his bed, creating a makeshift seat on the floor that could better support her. The gesture was practical, but she noticed the care behind it. "Better?" he asked, not meeting her eyes. "Thank you." She settled cross-legged on the cushions, her wedding dress spreading around her like a pool of cream. Even sitting, she was nearly as tall as Marcus standing. He busied himself at the fireplace, adding logs with unnecessary precision, anything to avoid looking directly at her. The woman who claimed to be his Annie. The woman who might actually be his Annie. "Tell me about the last 12 years, she said quietly. Marcus's hand stilled on the poker. "Not much to tell. I trap, I hunt, I trade furs for supplies twice a year. Simple life. Lonely life." He turned then, studying her face in the firelight. "And yours wasn't—" Anna Mae laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Lonely doesn't begin to cover it. Do you know what it's like being the tallest woman in 3 territories? Every room I walk into, conversations stop. Children point and stare. Grown men either cower or see dollar signs." She pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself as small as possible. It was heartbreaking to watch someone so powerful trying to shrink. "I work for traveling shows," she continued. "The Kansas Giantess, they call me. People would pay 50 cents just to stand next to me for a photograph. The showman would make up stories about how I got so tall. Said I was raised by grizzly bears, or that I fell asleep under a magic beanstalk. Marcus felt anger building in his chest. That's horrible. It paid for food and shelter, she said with a shrug. Most of the time, anyway. Some towns wouldn't let the show perform. Said I was too frightening for decent folk to look at. Thunder crashed overhead, and both of them jumped. In the sudden silence that followed, Marcus could hear his own heart beating. You said you tried to write, he said finally, every week for 2 years. Her voice got smaller. I told you about my condition, about where I was living, about how much I missed you. I begged you to write back, even if it was just to tell me you'd found someone else. Marcus closed his eyes. I never got them. I know that now. But then, I thought you just didn't want anything to do with a freak. The word hit him like a slap. Don't call yourself that. Why not? It's what everyone else calls me. I'm not everyone else. The words came out fiercer than he intended. And you're not a freak. You're just different. Different. She tested the word like it was foreign to her tongue. I suppose that's kin to the most. Marcus moved closer, sitting on the edge of his bed, so they were nearly at eye level. Annie, look at me. She raised her head, and he saw tears tracking down her cheeks. You're not a freak, he said firmly. You're not a monster. You're not a curiosity. You're a woman who's been dealt a hard hand, but you're still... He struggled for words. You're still you. Am I? She whispered. Sometimes I feel like that little girl died along with everyone's memory of her. Like I'm just wearing her skin while being something else entirely. What do you remember about that last night? Marcus asked softly. Before I left the mountains? A smile ghosted across her face. The harvest dance. You wore your father's good shirt, the blue one that brought out your eyes. I wore my mother's yellow dress, the one with the tiny flowers. And you told me you were scared. She looked directly at him now. Scared that going away to make our fortune would change you, that you'd come back different, harder, that I wouldn't love the man you became. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. What did you tell me? I told you that loving someone means loving all the versions of them. The boy you were, the man you become, and every step in between. Her voice broke slightly. I told you I'd love you if you came back rich or poor, successful or broken, gentle or hardened by life. And then I kissed you under the oak tree. And then you kissed me under the oak tree. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. You promised come back for me, and I promised to wait. They sat in silence for a moment, the storm raging outside, while something much quieter but more powerful stirred between them. I did wait, she said finally. Even when I got sick, even when I started growing, even when Father sent me away. I waited for 5 years, Marcus. 5 years of believing that someday you'd come riding back to claim me. What changed? Reality. The word came out bitter. Word finally reached me that you've been seen in the mountains, living alone. No wife, no family, just you and the wilderness. I realized you weren't coming back because you couldn't. Because somewhere along the way, you decided that the boy who made those promises was dead. Marcus flinched. She wasn't wrong. I became the same thing, she continued. The girl who made those promises was gone, and in her place was this giant creature that children ran from and men gawked at. So I stopped waiting and started surviving. But you came looking for me anyway. Not for the promises, she said quickly. Those died years ago. I came because I needed to know if the love underneath them was real, if what we had was strong enough to exist between who we are now, not who we used to be. Another crash of thunder, closer this time. The storm was directly overhead now. I don't know if I can, Marcus admitted quietly. Love you, I mean, the way you are now, the way I am now. It should have hurt, but Anna Mae felt oddly relieved by his honesty. That's why I had to ask, she said. Better to know than to spend my last months wondering. Your last months. He ran his hands through his hair. God, Annie, you're really dying. The doctors think so. My heart wasn't meant to pump blood through a body this size. It's already working too hard, and it's getting worse. Marcus stood abruptly, pacing to the small window. Outside, he could see nothing but sheets of rain and darkness. How long have you known? He asked without turning around. 6 months. That's when Dr. Patterson in Denver confirmed what I already suspected. The chest pains, the shortness of breath, the dizzy spells. Is there anything they can do? Rest. Eat well. Try not to strain myself. She laughed shakily. Apparently, riding 300 miles to the mountains to confront your childhood sweetheart doesn't qualify as rest. Marcus turned back to her, and she was struck by how much pain was written across his weathered features. Why didn't you tell me that first? Why start with all the other stuff? Because I didn't want your pity, she said fiercely. I want to know if you could love me despite what I become, not because I'm dying. And now I know. She struggled to her feet, the wedding dress rustling around her. And it's okay, Marcus. Really, I didn't come here expecting you to fall into my arms like some fairy tale. I just needed to close the circle. She moved toward her coat, hanging by the door. The storm's letting up. I should go. Where? His voice was sharp with concern. It's the middle of the night, and you just said you're sick. There's a boarding house in Cedar Falls, about 20 miles south. I can make it if I start now. In this weather? On those mountain roads. Marcus shook his head. You'll end up at the bottom of a ravine. Then that solves everyone's problems, doesn't it? The words came out more bitter than she intended. Marcus was across the room in 3 strides, his hands on her shoulders, stopping her from reaching for her coat. Don't say that, he said roughly. Don't ever say that. She looked down at him. This man she'd loved as a boy and still loved as a stranger. Why do you care? You just told me you don't think you can love me. I said I don't know if I can, he corrected. That's different. Is it? Marcus stared up at her, taking in every detail of her face. The bone structure was the same, just larger, more defined. The eyes were unchanged except for the sadness that lived in them now. The mouth he'd kissed 1,000 times in memory was wider, but still curved the same way when she was thinking. You're still beautiful, he said suddenly. Anna Mae's breath caught. Don't lie to me. Please. Not about that. I'm not lying. His voice was rough with emotion. You're different, yes. Intimidating as hell, absolutely. But you're still beautiful, Annie. Maybe more beautiful because of everything you survived. Tears started flowing down her cheeks again, but she didn't look away. Then why can't you love me? Because I'm scared, he admitted. Scared of losing you again. Scared of what people will say. Scared of not being man enough for a woman like you become. And I'm scared of being too much woman for any man to handle, she whispered back. They stood there in firelight, both afraid, both hurting, both desperately wanting something that seemed impossible to reach. Stay until morning, Marcus said finally. Please, let me at least make sure you get safely down the mountain. Anna Mae nodded, not trusting her voice. As the storm continued to rage outside, they sat by the fire, not touching, but not quite separate either. Slowly, carefully, they began to talk about the years between, the loneliness, the dreams that died, and the hope that somehow survived. Neither of them slept that night, but somewhere in those quiet hours before dawn, something began to shift between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. The acknowledgement that the people they'd become, while different from who they'd been, might still be capable of something beautiful together. The question was whether they'd be brave enough to try. Dawn broke over the Colorado mountains like a promise kept. Golden light streamed through Marcus's small window, painting everything in warm honey tones. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and sparkling. Anna Mae stood at the window, still in her torn wedding dress, watching the sunrise paint the peaks. She hadn't slept, but neither had Marcus. They'd spent the night talking, sharing stories, slowly peeling back 12 years of separation like layers of bark from a tree. It's beautiful, she said softly. Marcus joined her at the window, close enough that he smelled the faint scent of roses that still clung to her hair despite everything she'd been through. It's why I stayed, he said. Why I never came back to Kansas. Out here, things make sense. The mountains don't judge you. They don't care what you look like or where you came from. They just are. Anna Mae turned to look at him, and he was struck again by how familiar her eyes were despite everything else that had changed. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. To just be. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching the sun climb higher over the peaks. I thought it was, he said finally. For 12 years, I thought simple was enough. Safe was enough. But then you showed up, and suddenly simple feels like hiding. I don't want you to change your life for me, Marcus, especially not out of pity. This isn't pity. He turned to face her fully, craning his neck to meet her eyes. This is terror, pure, bone-deep terror. She frowned. Of what? Of loving you and losing you again. Of not being strong enough for what you need. Of watching you die and knowing I wasted what time we had left because I was too scared to try. Anna Mae's breath caught. Marcus, I've been thinking all night, he continued, his voice gaining strength, about that boy who promised to love you forever, about whether he really died up here in these mountains, or if he just went to sleep for a while. And I think maybe it's time to wake him up. Before she could respond, Marcus did something that shocked them both. He stepped onto the wooden chair she'd been sitting on earlier, bringing himself almost to her eye level. This is crazy, he said, his hand shaking slightly as he reached up to touch her face. You're dying. I'm a hermit. People will stare wherever we go. Everything about this is impossible. Yes, she whispered, leaning into his touch. It is. But I love you, he said simply. Not the girl you were. Not despite the woman you become, but because of her. Because you're brave enough to track down your first love in the middle of the wilderness. Because you're strong enough to survive 12 years of cruelty and still have a heart gentle enough to worry about my feelings. Tears were streaming down both their faces now. I love you too, she whispered. I never stopped. Marcus pulled her face down to his and kissed her, and it was nothing like their innocent childhood kisses under the oak tree. This was desperate and passionate and full of 12 years of longing. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. What happens now? Anna Mae asked. Marcus stepped down from the chair, taking her hands in his. They were so large he could barely wrap his fingers around them, but they were still Annie's hands. Now we stop wasting time, he said firmly. If you got 6 months, then we've got 6 months to live a lifetime. We'll go wherever you want. Do whatever makes you happy. Paris, New York, California, I don't care. We'll travel the world if you want. Marcus, you hate cities. You hate crowds. I hate the idea of you dying alone more than I hate anything else in this world. His voice was fierce with determination. Annie, I spent 12 years thinking you were dead, and it nearly killed me. I won't spend another day taking you for granted. She stared down at him. This man who'd grown from a gentle boy she'd loved into someone strong enough to face the impossible. What about the staring? The whispers? People will think you're crazy for being with me. Marcus laughed, and there was something wild and free in the sound. Let them stare. Let them whisper. Do you know what I see when I look at you? She shook her head. I see the bravest woman in the world. I see someone who survived being abandoned by her family, exploited by strangers and dismissed by society, but still had the courage to risk everything for love. His voice grew tender. I see my Annie, grown up and magnificent. Even though I'm so much bigger than you, even though people will think you look ridiculous next to me, Annie, I'm a mountain man who live alone in a cabin. I haven't seen civilization in 2 years. You think I care what people think? He grinned up at her. Besides, you're not too big for me. I'm just going to have to get taller boots. That made her laugh, a sound like water over stones. Are you sure about this? She asked. Really sure. Instead of answering with words, Marcus began moving around the cabin with sudden purpose. He pulled out his travel pack, started gathering supplies. What are you doing? We're leaving, he said simply. Today. Right now. Where are we going? Marcus paused in his packing, a slow smile spreading across his weathered face. Everywhere, he said. We're going to see everything you've always wanted to see, do everything you've always wanted to do. We're going to make up for 12 years in whatever time we have left. But your life here, your cabin, will still be here when we get back. He crossed to her, taking her hands again. Annie, I've spent 12 years existing. Now I want to start living. She searched his face, looking for doubt, for fear, for any sign that he was just being noble. But all she saw was determination and love, and something she'd almost given up hoping for, acceptance. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's go live." They packed quickly, Marcus gathering his essential supplies, while Anna May changed out her torn wedding dress into practical traveling clothes she'd brought. When she emerged from behind the curtain he'd hung for privacy, she looked like what she truly was, an adventurer ready to take on the world. "One last thing," Marcus said, approaching with something behind his back. "What?" He pulled out a small bouquet of wildflowers, the same kind they used to pick together as children. "Anna May Sullivan," he said formally, though his eyes were twinkling. "Will you marry me? Not because you're dying, not because I feel sorry for you, but because I love you and I want whatever time we have left to be as your husband." She stared at him, this man kneeling before her in his simple cabin, and felt something broken inside her chest finally heal. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, Marcus Kane, I will marry you." They rode out of the mountains that morning, side by side, her on a large draft horse she'd bought in Denver, him on his smaller mountain pony. To any observer, they would have looked like an odd pair, the giant woman and the compact mountain man. But they didn't care about observers anymore. They had plans to make, places to see, and a love to live fully in whatever time they had left. As they crested the final ridge and looked back at the cabin one last time, Anna May reached over and took Marcus's hand. "No regrets?" she asked, echoing his question from the night before. "None," he said firmly, squeezing her fingers. "Only possibilities." They rode toward their future together. Two people who'd learned that love isn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone perfect for you. Someone worth facing the impossible for. 6 months or 60 years, they would face it together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Behind them, the mountain stood eternal and unchanging. Ahead of them, the world waited, vast and full of wonder. And in between, two hearts beat as one, finally home in each other's love. This story of impossible love and second chances shows us that sometimes the greatest adventures begin when we're brave enough to love despite the odds. Marcus and Anna may remind us that true love sees beyond appearances to the soul beneath, and that it's never too late to choose courage over fear. What touched your heart most about their story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing how these tales of love and redemption resonate with you. If this story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our weekly stories of hope, love, and the courage to live authentically. Your support helps us bring you more heartfelt tales that celebrate the triumph of the human spirit. Thank you for joining Marcus and Anna May on their journey. Until next time, remember, love sees what others overlook, and sometimes the most beautiful stories begin with the bravest choices.